The unmistakable crack of a hammer against wood echoed across the Montana prairie as Zara Winters drove another nail into the fence post with determined precision. The early morning sun cast long shadows over the rolling grasslands of her small ranch, turning the dew-covered grass into a sea of gold and amber. It was 1885, and for a 24-year-old widow trying to hold on to her late husband's homestead, every repair meant survival. Zara wiped the sweat from her brow with the back of her hand, leaving a smudge of dirt across her forehead. Her chestnut hair, hastily tied back with a faded ribbon, had begun to escape its confines, wisps dancing in the gentle breeze. The worn cotton dress she wore had seen better days, patched in several places and stained with the evidence of hard work. She was so absorbed in her task that she didn't notice the approaching rider until his horse's hooves caused the ground to vibrate beneath her feet. Instinctively, her hand moved to the small pistol tucked into the pocket of her apron. Living alone meant constant vigilance. The stranger approached slowly, a tall figure atop a muscular palomino. He wore the dust of long travel on his clothes, but there was something in his straight-backed posture that spoke of confidence rather than weariness. As he drew closer, Zara could make out a strong jaw shadowed with several days' worth of stubble, and eyes the color of a summer storm. "Morning, madam," he called out, stopping his horse at a respectful distance. "Didn't expect to find anyone out here, especially not someone tackling fence repairs alone." Zara continued her work, driving another nail into the post before answering. "This land isn't as empty as it looks, mister." The stranger dismounted in one fluid motion, revealing his full height. He stood well over 6 feet, broad-shouldered and lean-hipped, in the way of men who spent their days in the saddle. His clothes were trail-worn but of good quality, a dark blue shirt beneath a leather vest, denim pants tucked into well-used boots, and a wide-brimmed hat that had seen its share of weather. "Name's Kieran Wade," he said, removing his hat in a gesture of respect. "I've been riding for the Circle M outfit up north, on my way to new prospects." Zara measured him with her gaze, noting the Colt revolver on his hip and the way his eyes constantly scanned the horizon, the habits of a man accustomed to watching for trouble. "Zara Winters," she replied, returning to her work. "This is my land you're passing through." Kieran's gaze shifted to the fence she was repairing, a sturdy structure of posts and tightly strung wire. "That's a serious fence for this part of the territory. Most folks out here are still using split rail." "It keeps the coyotes out," Zara said simply, positioning another nail. "Coyotes don't much care about fences, madam," Kieran observed, a hint of amusement in his voice. Zara looked up then, meeting his eyes directly. "The two-legged kind do. At least it gives them pause." Understanding dawned in Kieran's expression. He looked beyond her to the modest homestead in the distance, a small cabin with a barn and corral nearby, smoke rising from the chimney. It was well kept, but isolated, vulnerable. "Your husband around?" he asked, though something in his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "6 feet under for nearly 2 years now," Zara replied, her voice matter-of-fact. "Fever took him before he could finish this fence line. I've been working on it, section by section, ever since." Kieran was silent for a moment, taking in the enormity of what this woman had undertaken. Miles of fence to maintain alone, not to mention the rest of a working ranch. "I could lend a hand," he offered. "I've built my share of fences." Zara hesitated, hammer poised mid-strike. Help was scarce, and her neighbors, few and far between as they were, had their own struggles. Pride warred with practicality. "I've got dinner cooking," she said finally. "You're welcome to stay and eat if you help me finish this section before sundown." Kieran nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth as he secured his horse to a nearby post and rolled up his sleeves. "Yes, madam. That sounds more than fair." As they worked side by side in the growing heat of the day, Neither could have predicted how this chance meeting would alter the course of their lives, or the dangers and joys that awaited them in the wild Montana territory. By midday, they had made significant progress. Kieran worked with the efficiency of someone who knew the value of movement, wasting no energy as he strung wire and secured posts. Occasionally, their hands would brush as they passed tools between them, causing an unexpected flutter in Zara's chest that she firmly ignored. "You handle tools better than most men I've known," Kieran observed, as he watched her skillfully splice two lengths of wire together. "Necessity," Zara replied. "After John died, I either learned or lost everything." "Your place looks well tended. You've done a remarkable job." Zara glanced toward her homestead, pride momentarily overcoming her guard. "It's not much, but it's mine. Or will be in 3 more years when I fulfill the homestead claim." "No family to help?" "My parents died when I was young. I was raised by my uncle in Missouri until I married John and came west." She hammered a staple into a post with perhaps more force than necessary. "What about you? Where are you headed?" Kieran paused, wiping sweat from his brow. "Heard there's work down in the Bitterroot Valley. Ranch manager position. I've had my fill of driving cattle for other men." "You don't strike me as a drifter," Zara said, studying him. "I've moved around, but always with purpose." His eyes met hers, steady and clear. "I was foreman at a spread in Wyoming for 5 years before the owner sold out to a cattle consortium. Then 2 years with Circle M until the same thing happened." "The big outfits are swallowing everything," Zara nodded. "They've been pressuring smaller places around here too." A shadow passed over Kieran's face. "You've had trouble?" Zara's expression tightened. "Nothing I can't handle." Before Kieran could press further, the distant sound of approaching riders caught their attention. 3 men on horseback were making their way toward them from the direction of town. Zara's posture immediately stiffened, her hand instinctively moving toward her pocket. "Friends of yours?" Kieran asked quietly, his own hand casually shifting closer to his holster. "Hardly," Zara muttered. "That's Knox Prescott and his men. He manages the Western Cattle Company properties. They've been trying to buy me out for months." Kieran positioned himself slightly in front of Zara as the riders approached, though he noted with admiration that she didn't back away. The leader was a well-dressed man in his 40s, with a carefully trimmed mustache and cold eyes that assessed Kieran with immediate suspicion. "Mrs. Winters?" Prescott called out as they reined in their horses. "I see you've hired help. Finally coming to your senses about managing this place alone?" "Just passing through," Kieran interjected before Zara could respond. "Lending a hand for a meal." Prescott's gaze flickered between them, calculating. "Generous of you. Though Mrs. Winters should know that temporary fixes won't solve her problems." He turned his attention fully to Zara. "I've come with another offer. The company is prepared to increase the price by 15%. "The answer is still no, Mr. Prescott," Zara replied evenly. "This land isn't for sale at any price." One of Prescott's companions, a lean man with a pockmarked face, spat on the ground. "Stubborn fool woman, you can't hold out forever." Kieran's stance shifted subtly, the movement causing his vest to open just enough to reveal the distinctive star-shaped scar on his chest that marked him as someone who'd seen his share of conflict. Prescott noticed, his eyes narrowing. "Do I know you, Cowboy?" "Don't believe we've had the pleasure," Kieran replied, his tone neutral but his eyes hard as flint. A tense moment passed before Prescott seemed to reach a decision. He tipped his hat with mock politeness. "Mrs. Winters, I'll call again when you've had time to reconsider. The company's patience isn't endless." With that, he wheeled his horse around, his men following as they rode toward the distant mountains. Zara and Kieran watched them go, neither speaking until the riders were well out of earshot. "Those are the coyotes your fence keeps out?" Kieran asked, his voice tinged with grim humor. "Some of them," Zara replied. "They started coming around about 6 months after John died." first with condolences, then with offers, and finally with threats barely disguised as friendly advice. What do they want with your place? It's good land, but hardly the richest in the territory. Zara gestured toward the stream that cut across the far corner of her property. Water rights. My claim includes the headwaters of Fuller Creek. In a dry year, whoever controls that water controls all the grazing for miles around. Kieran nodded, understanding immediately the value of such a resource in cattle country. And they're not the type to take no for an answer. They've run off 3 other small ranchers in the valley already. Zara's voice held steady, but Kieran could see the tension in her shoulders. 2 sold out. The third had a mysterious barn fire that destroyed his winter hay. He left soon after. The implications hung in the air between them. Kieran studied the horizon where Prescott and his men had disappeared, his expression thoughtful. That dinner still on offer? He asked finally, turning back to Zara with a smile that softened his weathered features. If we finish this section before sundown, she reminded him, but her own lips curved slightly in response. They returned to their work with renewed purpose, the fence growing steadily as the afternoon progressed. Kieran found himself watching Zara when she wasn't looking, the determined set of her jaw, the grace in her movements despite the physical demands of the labor, the occasional glimpse of vulnerability quickly masked by resolve. By the time the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, they had completed more than Zara had initially hoped. The new section of fence stood strong, a barrier against both animal predators and human threats. You've earned that meal twice over, Zara admitted as they gathered the remaining tools. I'd have been working on this for days alone. Happy to help, Kieran replied. It's been a while since I've worked alongside someone who knows what they're doing. The unexpected compliment brought a flush to Zara's cheeks that had nothing to do with the day's exertion. She turned quickly toward the cabin. Let's get cleaned up. Food should be ready by now. Inside the small cabin, Kieran was struck by the careful order of the place. It was sparsely furnished but spotlessly clean, with simple curtains at the windows and a few treasured books on a shelf near the stone fireplace. A pot of stew simmered on the cast-iron stove, filling the room with a savory aroma that reminded him how long it had been since he'd eaten a home-cooked meal. Zara gestured to a wash basin near the door. You can clean up there. I'll fetch fresh water for myself from the pump. As she stepped outside with a bucket, Kieran took the opportunity to study the cabin more closely. On the mantel sat a daguerreotype of a young couple, Zara, and a man he presumed to be her late husband. They looked impossibly young and hopeful, their futures stretching before them like an open prairie. When Zara returned, she found him looking at the photograph. That was taken the day we left Missouri, she said quietly. John was 22. I was 18. You were brave to come so far. We were foolish, Zara corrected, but without bitterness. Full of dreams about building something of our own. Neither of us knew what we were in for. And yet you stayed, even after he was gone. Zara set the water bucket down with a thoughtful expression. This place cost us everything. Our savings, years of backbreaking work. In the end, it cost John his life. I couldn't bear for it all to be for nothing. The simple honesty of her words struck Kieran deeply. He had known many who had given up and turned back when faced with the harsh realities of frontier life. Zara's determination to honor her husband's memory by seeing their shared dream through spoke of a strength that went beyond physical endurance. They ate at the small table by the stove, the stew hearty with vegetables from Zara's garden and meat from her smokehouse. The bread was fresh, evidence that she had risen before dawn not only to work on the fence, but to bake as well. This is the best meal I've had in months, Kieran said appreciatively. Maybe years. It's nothing special, Zara demurred, but looked pleased nonetheless. Where I come from, good food and honest company are the most special things there are. As they ate, Conversation flowed more easily than either had expected. Kieran told her about growing up on a small farm in Pennsylvania, losing his parents to influenza when he was 16, and making his way west with nothing but determination and a willingness to work. Zara shared stories of her childhood in Missouri, her quick marriage to John when her uncle threatened to send her to work as a housekeeper for a distant relative, and their journey to Montana Territory to claim their homestead. "The first winter nearly broke us," she admitted. "We weren't prepared for how harsh it would be. Lost half our livestock. Would have lost more if our neighbor, old Sam Jeffers, hadn't shown us how to build proper shelter." "Jeffers? From up by Eagle Creek?" Kieran asked. Zara nodded, surprised. "You know him." "Rode with him once, years back. Cattle drive from Bozeman to Cheyenne. Crusty old fellow, but knows more about surviving in this country than any 10 men put together. He taught me everything I know about keeping animals alive through winter," Zara said. "After John died, Sam checked on me when he could, until his rheumatism got too bad for him to make the ride. Haven't seen him in months now." "Good man to have in your corner." Kieran hesitated, then added, "Sounds like you could use a few more like him, given your situation with Prescott and his outfit." Zara's expression closed slightly. "I manage." "No doubt," Kieran agreed easily. "But even the strongest need allies sometimes." Before Zara could respond, a commotion outside drew their attention, the sound of a horse in distress and heavy objects being knocked over. They both rushed to the door to find Kieran's Palomino rearing in panic as two shadowy figures attempted to lead it away from where it had been tethered near the barn. "Hey!" Kieran shouted, charging forward without hesitation. The would-be horse thieves scrambled at the sound of his voice. One managed to swing onto his own mount, but the other was slower. Kieran tackled him to the ground before he could escape, the two men rolling in the dirt in a flurry of fists. Zara had grabbed her rifle from beside the door and now stood with it aimed steadily at the mounted thief. "Don't move," she commanded, her voice carrying clearly in the evening air. The man on horseback froze, clearly recognizing that the distance was too short for her to miss if she fired. His companion continued to struggle with Kieran until a well-placed punch left him dazed on the ground. Kieran got to his feet, breathing hard, and dragged the stunned man up by his collar. In the fading light, Zara recognized him as one of Prescott's men, the pockmarked one who had spat on her land earlier. "Looks like your coyotes got bold," Kieran said grimly. The mounted thief made a sudden move, spurring his horse forward despite Zara's warning. She fired a shot that deliberately kicked up dirt just ahead of the horse's hooves, causing it to rear again. "Next one won't miss," she called out calmly. The rider yanked his horse around and galloped away into the gathering darkness, abandoning his partner without a backward glance. Kieran marched his captive toward the barn. "Got any rope, Mrs. Winters? I believe we need to secure this gentleman until we decide what to do with him." Within minutes, the thief was tied securely to a post in the barn, his protests silenced by the grim expressions of both Zara and Kieran. "Tucker's gonna come back with the others," the man threatened. "You'll regret this." "I'm already regretting not letting Mrs. Winters put a bullet in you," Kieran replied conversationally. "So I wouldn't push my luck if I were you." They left him there, securing the barn door from the outside before returning to the cabin. Once inside, Zara began methodically loading shells into her shotgun, her movements precise despite the slight tremor in her hands. "You think they'll come back tonight?" she asked, her voice steady even as her fingers fumbled with a cartridge. Kieran moved to the window, scanning the darkness. "Possible. More likely they'll report back to Prescott first." He turned to face her. "This wasn't a coincidence. They followed me here. Waited until we were inside. Why take your horse? Why not just run us off or worse? A strange rider in the area who suddenly disappears. No questions asked." Kieran's expression was grim. "And if your place happened to burn down in the confusion, with no witnesses left?" Zara nodded slowly, the implication's clear. They're getting desperate or impatient. Either way, it's escalating. Kieran checked his own revolver. I'll take first watch. You should get some rest. This isn't your fight, Zara said, though there was a question in her voice. Kieran met her gaze steadily. They made it mine when they tried to steal my horse. And I've never been one to ride away from trouble, especially when it's threatening a lady who's shown me hospitality. Something shifted in Zara's expression, a softening around her eyes, a momentary vulnerability that she quickly masked. We'll take turns watching, she decided. 4 hours each. I'll show you where I keep extra ammunition. As they prepared for what might be a long night, moving around the small cabin in an unexpectedly comfortable rhythm, both were aware of a connection forming between them, forged in shared danger and mutual respect. Neither spoke of it, but it hung in the air like the promise of rain on a drought-stricken prairie. Outside, darkness settled completely over the Montana landscape, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, a reminder of the wilderness and its dangers that surrounded them on all sides. The night passed without further incident, though neither Zara nor Kieran truly relaxed their vigilance. When dawn broke over the eastern ridge, casting long shadows across the homestead, they found themselves sharing coffee at the small table, their conversation hushed, but easier than it had been the previous evening. "What do you propose we do with our guest?" Zara asked, nodding toward the barn where their prisoner had spent an uncomfortable night. Kieran considered the question as he sipped the strong, bitter coffee. "The nearest law is in Helena, 2 days' ride from here. By the time we could bring a marshal back, Prescott would have his story straight and witnesses to back whatever tale he spins." "So we let him go?" Zara frowned. "That hardly seems like justice." "Not empty-handed," Kieran replied, a glint in his eye. "I think it's time to send Prescott a message of our own." They found their prisoner cold, hungry, and considerably less defiant than he had been the night before. His name, he reluctantly revealed, was Harley Dobbs, and he had been working for the Western Cattle Company for just over a year. "Prescott said it was just to scare you a bit," Dobbs muttered. "Take the stranger's horse, make some noise, get you thinking about how vulnerable you are out here alone. And if we'd both been killed in the process?" Kieran's voice was dangerously soft. Dobbs shifted uncomfortably. "Wasn't supposed to go that far." "But it might have," Zara observed. "Accidents happen, especially in the dark." Kieran studied the man thoughtfully. "Here's what's going to happen, Dobbs. You're going to take a message back to Prescott. Tell him that Mrs. Winters is not alone anymore. Tell him that her water rights and her land are protected now, and any further attempts to intimidate or harm her will be met with consequences he won't enjoy." "And who exactly am I saying is protecting her?" Dobbs asked, a hint of his earlier belligerence returning. Kieran leaned closer. "Tell him it's Kieran Wade. He might not know the name now, but I guarantee he'll remember it going forward." Something in Kieran's tone must have conveyed the seriousness of the threat, because Dobbs paled slightly and nodded. They untied him, gave him enough food and water for the journey back to town, and sent him on his way, with a final warning that they would be watching. As his figure receded into the distance, Zara turned to Kieran with a questioning look. "You're not really staying, are you? What about your job prospect in the Bitterroot?" Kieran gazed out at the vast landscape, the rolling hills giving way to distant mountains. "The position will keep for a while. I think your situation here is more pressing." "I can't ask you to put your life on hold for my problems," Zara protested. "You didn't ask. I'm offering." Kieran's expression was earnest. "Besides, your fence still needs work, and I suspect there are other repairs around the place that could use an extra pair of hands." Zara hesitated, torn between pride and practicality. "I can pay you something, though not what you'd earn as a ranch manager." "Room and board is payment enough for now," Kieran assured her, and the satisfaction of seeing Prescott's face when he realizes his intimidation tactics have backfired. After a moment's consideration, Zara nodded. A month then, to get the most pressing work done and see if Prescott backs down. After that, we can reassess. Agreed. Kieran extended his hand to seal the deal, and when Zara took it, they both felt the significance of the moment a partnership formed in challenging circumstances, built on mutual need, but with the potential for something more. Neither could have predicted how that month would transform not only Zara's homestead, but their lives as well. The following weeks fell into a rhythm that surprised both of them with its ease. Kieran rose before dawn each day to tend to the livestock while Zara prepared breakfast. They would discuss the day's tasks over the morning meal, then work separately or together, depending on what needed to be done. Kieran repaired the sagging roof of the barn, reinforced the corral, and continued the fence line with an efficiency that Zara had to admire. She, in turn, maintained her garden, preserved food for the coming winter, and kept the household running while also helping with the outdoor work. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch if the weather permitted, or by the fire if it didn't, sharing stories of their pasts and occasionally speculating about their futures. Kieran spoke of his dream to one day have his own ranch, a place where he could build something lasting. Zara confessed that despite her determination to keep her homestead, there were nights when the loneliness and endless work made her question whether she could continue indefinitely on her own. "John and I plan to have children," she admitted one evening as they sat watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. "We talked about filling this place with family, building additional rooms as we needed them." She gestured toward the cabin that now seemed too large for just one person. "Instead, I rattle around in there alone, working myself to exhaustion just to keep from thinking about how different it all turned out." Kieran was silent for a moment, respecting the weight of her confession. "Life has a way of taking unexpected turns," he said finally. "But that doesn't mean the new path can't lead somewhere worthwhile." Their conversation was interrupted by the approach of a wagon coming up the long drive from the main road. Both tensed instinctively, but as the vehicle drew closer, Zara relaxed. "It's Abigail Potter," she explained, "our nearest neighbor, about 5 miles east. She and her husband Daniel have a small sheep operation." The wagon stopped in front of the cabin, and a plump, pleasant-faced woman in her 30s climbed down with a basket over her arm. She paused when she spotted Kieran, surprise evident in her expression. "Well now, Zara Winters, you've been keeping secrets?" she called out with good-natured curiosity. "Daniel said he thought he saw smoke from your chimney at odd hours, but I didn't expect to find you with company." Zara made the introductions, explaining that Kieran was helping with repairs in exchange for room and board. Abigail's knowing smile suggested she had her own theories about the arrangement, but she was too polite to voice them directly. "I've brought some of my blueberry preserves and a wheel of cheese," she said, presenting the basket to Zara. "And Daniel sent along some news that might interest you both." They invited her inside for coffee, and once they were settled at the table, Abigail shared what her husband had learned in town the previous day. "Knox Prescott has been in a foul mood lately, according to the bartender at the Silver Dollar. Seems one of his men came back with a message that got under his skin." She glanced at Kieran. "Your name was mentioned, Mr. Wade. Prescott's been asking around about you." Kieran's expression remained neutral. "Has he found anything of interest?" "That depends on what you consider interesting," Abigail replied. "Word is he sent a telegram to his contacts in Wyoming, something about checking your background." Zara looked at Kieran with concern. "Is that going to be a problem?" "Not for us," Kieran assured her. "Prescott might not like what he learns, but there's nothing in my past I'm ashamed of." Abigail studied him thoughtfully. "Daniel thought he recognized your name from somewhere. Were you involved in that business with the Hargrove outfit a few years back? The land dispute that ended up in the territorial courts?" A flicker of surprise crossed Kieran's face. "Your husband has a good memory. Yes, I testified against Howard Hargrove when he tried to forge documents to claim water rights that belonged to smaller ranchers. It wasn't a popular stand to take at the time. But it was the right one, Abigail said firmly. Hargrove was a bully who thought money could buy him whatever he wanted, including the law. She turned to Zara. You found yourself a man of principle, it seems. Zara flushed slightly. Mr. Wade is an employee, Abigail. Nothing more. The older woman raised an eyebrow but didn't contradict her. Well, employee or not, you should both be careful. Prescott doesn't strike me as the type to give up easily, especially if his bosses at the cattle company are putting pressure on him to secure those water rights. After Abigail departed, promising to have Daniel stop by in a few days with more news from town, Zara and Kieran sat in thoughtful silence. You never mentioned your involvement in a legal case against a powerful rancher, Zara said finally. Kieran shrugged. It wasn't relevant until now. But yes, I stood up against similar tactics in Wyoming. Hargrove tried to divert a stream that several small farms depended on. When they protested, accidents started happening, barn fires, livestock disappearing, that sort of thing. Like what's happening here, Zara murmured. Exactly like what's happening here, Kieran agreed. The difference is that Hargrove got caught. One of his men turned on him when the pressure mounted, and I had gathered enough evidence to support the smaller landowner's claims. He paused. It's why I recognize Prescott's methods. I've seen them before. And what happened to Hargrove? He lost the case and a significant amount of money. Last I heard, he'd moved to California to try his luck there. Kieran's expression darkened. But he made sure I understood that I'd made an enemy before he left. It's why I've moved around since then. Zara absorbed this information, seeing Kieran in a new light. So when you told Dobbs to give Prescott your name, I was letting him know that I've dealt with his kind before, and won, Kieran confirmed. It's a calculated risk. He might back off, or he might decide to escalate. And you're willing to face that because... Zara left the question hanging. Kieran met her gaze directly. Because some things are worth fighting for. The intensity in his eyes caused Zara's heart to beat faster. She looked away first, suddenly conscious of how close they were sitting, how the lamplight softened the angles of his face, how easy it would be to lean toward him. We should get some rest, she said abruptly, rising from the table. There's more fence to mend tomorrow. Kieran nodded, a hint of something like disappointment crossing his features before he masked it. Of course. Good night, Zara. It was the first time he had used her given name without the formality of Mrs. Winters, and the sound of it in his deep voice followed her into dreams that left her restless and confused come morning. The days that followed brought increasing evidence that Prescott was indeed gathering information about Kieran. Daniel Potter confirmed on his visit that telegrams had been exchanged between Helena and Cheyenne, and that Prescott had been closeted with the other managers from the Western Cattle Company for a long meeting. Something's brewing, Daniel warned them as he helped Kieran repair a broken wheel on Zara's wagon. Prescott's hired 2 new men, rough-looking fellows that no one in town recognizes. They've been asking questions about this place, about your routines. Kieran exchanged a look with Zara. We'll need to be extra vigilant, no going anywhere alone, and always armed. Daniel nodded in agreement. Abigail and I have been discussing it. We want you both to know that if trouble comes, you can count on us. The Millers over at Coyote Creek feel the same. We're tired of watching the big outfits push smaller folks around. That's a generous offer, Zara said, touched by the show of support. But I wouldn't want to put your family at risk. We're already at risk, Daniel replied soberly. If they succeed in driving you out, who do you think they'll target next? My sheep operation isn't any more welcome to the cattle barons than your water rights. The solidarity of her neighbors gave Zara a renewed sense of determination. Perhaps she wasn't as alone as she had believed all these months. That evening, as she and Kieran sat at the table reviewing their preparations for whatever might come, She found herself studying his profile in the lamplight. "Why did you really stop here that first day?" she asked suddenly. "There are more direct routes to the Bitterroot Valley." Kieran looked up from the map they had been examining, surprise evident in his expression. "I told you, I was passing through. But why this way? This isn't the main trail." He hesitated, then set down the pencil he had been using to mark potential weak points in their defenses. "Truth. I had heard rumors about the Western Cattle Company's expansion in this area. Given my history with similar situations, I was curious." "So you were deliberately investigating them?" Zara pressed. "Not officially. But I've made it something of a personal mission to keep an eye on outfits that use intimidation to get their way." Kieran's voice was quiet but firm. "When I saw you working on that fence alone, something told me I should stop. Call it instinct." Zara absorbed this revelation. "And if you hadn't found me here? If the place had been abandoned?" "I would have continued on. Made inquiries in town, perhaps." His gaze held hers steadily. "But I'm glad I found you, Zara. Not just because of Prescott and his schemes, but because—" He trailed off, seeming to search for the right words. "Because?" she prompted, her heart beating rapidly against her ribs. Kieran reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "Because in all my years of wandering, I've never met anyone quite like you. Your courage, your determination to honor your husband's memory by keeping this place going, it's remarkable." The mention of John should have been a reminder of her loss, a barrier between them. Instead, Zara found herself turning her hand beneath Kieran's so that their palms met, fingers intertwining. "I've been alone for so long," she whispered. "I'd almost forgotten what it feels like to have someone to rely on, to share the burden with." "You don't have to be alone anymore," Kieran said softly. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. Then, with deliberate slowness, Kieran leaned across the table. Zara met him halfway, their lips coming together in a kiss that began tentatively but quickly deepened with surprising intensity. When they finally drew apart, both were breathing faster, eyes wide with the realization of what had just happened. "I'm sorry," Kieran began, but Zara shook her head. "Don't be. I'm not." Her voice was steady despite the flush in her cheeks. "Life is too uncertain out here to deny whatever happiness we can find." Kieran smiled then, a genuine smile that transformed his features and made him look younger than his 32 years. "Is that what this is? Happiness?" "It could be," Zara replied, returning his smile with one of her own. "If we're brave enough to find out." They might have said more, explored this new territory opening between them, but a sudden noise from outside caught their attention, the distinctive sound of a horse approaching at speed. Both were instantly alert, the moment of intimacy replaced by wariness. Kieran moved to the window while Zara reached for the rifle that now stayed constantly within reach. "Single rider," Kieran reported, peering through the darkness. "Coming fast. Looks like it's Abigail's boy, Timothy." They hurried outside to meet the teenager as he reined his horse to a stop, the animal's flanks heaving with exertion. "Ma sent me," Timothy gasped, his young face grave in the light spilling from the cabin door. "Riders coming, at least 6 of them, heading this way from town. Pa says they didn't look like they were coming for a social call." Kieran's expression hardened. "How long ago did they leave town?" "About an hour before I set out. Pa saw them at the mercantile, stocking up on ammunition. One of them mentioned your name, Mr. Wade. That's when Pa sent me across the back country to warn you." "They'll be here within the hour then," Kieran calculated. He turned to Zara. "We need to prepare." Timothy shifted nervously on his horse. "Pa said to tell you he's gathering the Millers and anyone else he can find. They'll come as soon as possible, but it might be a while." "Thank your father for us," Zara told him. "Now get home to your mother. Stay off the main road." As the boy galloped away into the night, Kieran and Zara exchanged a look that communicated more than words could have. This was what they had been preparing for, but now that it was upon them, the reality was sobering. "We should move the horses into the root cellar," Zara suggested, already mentally cataloging what needed to be done. "If they can't find mounts, they'll be stranded." Kieran nodded. "And we'll need to position ourselves carefully. The cabin has good sight lines, but we're vulnerable from the back if they circle around." They worked quickly, securing animals, gathering weapons and ammunition, and establishing defensive positions that would give them the best chance against superior numbers. As they worked, Kieran noticed that Zara's hands were steady, her movements precise despite the danger approaching. "You've done this before," he observed as she methodically loaded extra shells for the shotgun. "Once," she confirmed. "About a year ago. 3 men tried to run off my cattle. I caught them in the act." She checked the action on the shotgun with practiced ease. They didn't expect a woman to know how to shoot. Their mistake. Kieran felt a surge of admiration for her. "Remind me never to underestimate you, Zara Winters." She looked up at him, a glint of determination in her eyes. "Just remember, whatever happens tonight, this is my home. I won't be driven from it." "Our home," Kieran corrected without thinking. When Zara's eyes widened, he added quietly, "At least for now. And I protect what's mine." There was no time to explore the implications of that statement. The distant sound of multiple horses approaching from the direction of town signaled that their visitors had arrived. Kieran positioned himself at the front window while Zara took the one overlooking the barn and corral. The riders appeared as dark silhouettes against the starlit prairie, moving with purpose toward the homestead. They stopped just beyond easy rifle range, and one figure detached from the group to ride forward alone. "That'll be Prescott," Kieran murmured, "coming to make demands before they show force." As predicted, Knox Prescott reined in his horse about 30 yards from the cabin and called out, "Mrs. Winters, I know you're in there. We need to talk." Kieran nodded to Zara, who opened the door just enough to make her voice heard. "Any talking can be done in daylight, Mr. Prescott. At a reasonable hour." "I'm afraid this matter can't wait," Prescott replied. Even at a distance, the false politeness in his tone was evident. "It concerns your guest. Mr. Wade has some explaining to do regarding his activities in Wyoming territory." Kieran moved to the door, placing a hand on Zara's shoulder as he called out, "My affairs in Wyoming were settled legally, Prescott. If you've done your research properly, you know that." "Oh, I've done my research," Prescott answered, a new edge entering his voice. "Including speaking with associates of Howard Hargrove. They remember you quite vividly, Wade. In fact, there are some who would pay handsomely to know your whereabouts." "Is that a threat?" Kieran's voice remained calm, but Zara could feel the tension in his body. "Merely an observation. You've made powerful enemies, Mr. Wade, the kind that don't forget." Prescott shifted in his saddle. "However, I'm authorized to offer you both a way out of your current predicament." "We're listening," Zara said, though her tone suggested limited patience. "Mrs. Winters, the Western Cattle Company will increase its offer for your property by 25% above the already generous price previously discussed. A bank draft can be drawn up tomorrow." Prescott paused. "As for you, Wade, we're prepared to forget your interference in company business. You can ride out tonight, free and clear." Kieran laughed, the sound devoid of humor. "And if we decline this generous offer?" "Then I'm afraid I can't guarantee your safety. There are men with me who have personal grievances against you, Wade. And Mrs. Winters, without his protection, your situation becomes very precarious indeed." Zara stepped forward, her voice carrying clearly across the yard. "Mr. Prescott, I believe I've made my position clear multiple times. This land is not for sale. Not to you, not to the Western Cattle Company, not to anyone." She took a breath. "As for Mr. Wade, he stays or goes as he chooses. But your threats hold no weight here." There was a moment of silence before Prescott responded, his tone hardening. That's your final word? It is, Zara confirmed. Then you leave us no choice. Prescott wheeled his horse around and rode back to the waiting group. Kieran closed the door, securing the heavy wooden bar across it. They'll come at us from multiple directions, he predicted, moving back to his position at the window. Probably try to set fire to the outbuildings first, force us to divide our attention. Zara nodded grimly. I've kept buckets of water ready by each door. If we can hold them off until Daniel arrives with help. We will, Kieran assured her. Though they both knew he couldn't promise such a thing, they didn't have long to wait. Within minutes, the riders had split into smaller groups, circling the property to approach from different angles. Gunfire erupted from the direction of the barn, bullets thudding into the wooden walls of the cabin. Kieran returned fire carefully, making each shot count. They're trying to get us to waste ammunition, he called to Zara. Don't shoot unless you have a clear target. The exchange of gunfire continued sporadically for what seemed like hours but was likely only 20 minutes. True to Kieran's prediction, a flicker of flames appeared at the corner of the barn. They've set fire to the hay storage, Zara reported, her voice tight with anger. I need to try to put it out before it spreads. Too dangerous, Kieran objected. That's exactly what they want. If that barn goes up, we lose everything stored inside, Zara argued, including our best chance of rebuilding if the worst happens. Before Kieran could respond, a new sound joined the chaos, multiple riders approaching fast from the east, accompanied by shouts and the distinctive crack of Winchester rifles. Daniel, Zara breathed. He made it. The new arrivals immediately engaged Prescott's men, the balance of power shifting as the attackers found themselves caught between defending forces. Through the window, Kieran could make out at least 8 riders, including Daniel Potter and several men he recognized from brief encounters in town. They're retreating, he reported as Prescott's group began to fall back toward the main road. Your neighbors came through. The firefight continued for several more minutes, but it was clear that Prescott had lost his advantage. With a final volley of shots, his remaining men galloped away into the darkness, leaving 2 figures motionless on the ground near the barn. Cautiously, Kieran and Zara emerged from the cabin to find Daniel and the others already working to extinguish the fire at the barn. It had been caught early enough that the damage was minimal, though the smell of smoke hung heavy in the air. Looks like we got here just in time, Daniel said, approaching them with his rifle still at the ready. Everyone all right? Thanks to you and the others, Zara confirmed, her relief evident. How did you manage to gather so many so quickly? Daniel grinned. Word travels fast when it's important. Nobody wants to see Prescott and his kind taking over the valley. When the Millers heard what was happening, they spread the word to the Johnsons, who told the Carpenters. A regular militia, Kieran observed, impressed. Neighbors looking out for neighbors, Daniel corrected. The way it should be. One of the other men approached, his expression grim. We've got 2 of Prescott's men down. One's dead. Took a bullet straight through the heart. The other one's alive but wounded. Bring the wounded man to the cabin, Zara instructed. I'll see what I can do for him. As the neighbors organized themselves to secure the property and tend to the wounded, Kieran pulled Daniel aside. This isn't over, he warned. Prescott will be back. Probably with more men. Daniel nodded soberly. We know. That's why we've come prepared to stay. 4 of us will remain tonight, and we'll organize a rotation going forward until this is settled one way or another. That's a significant commitment, Kieran said. These men have their own places to tend. Like I said before, if Zara falls, we all become targets. Daniel's expression was resolute. Besides, it's about time someone stood up to the cattle barons. They can't just take whatever they want anymore. Inside the cabin, Zara was tending to the wounded man, a young cowhand barely in his 20s, who looked terrified as she cleaned and bandaged the bullet graze along his ribs. What's your name? she asked him as she worked. Billy, he replied shakily. Billy Tennant. Well, Billy Tennant, you've had a rough night. Want to tell me how you ended up riding with Prescott's bunch? The young man winced as she applied pressure to stop the bleeding. Needed work. Cattle company pays better than most. Didn't know what I was getting into until it was too late to back out. Zara regarded him thoughtfully. And now? Billy met her gaze, shame evident in his young face. I ain't no killer, madam. When the shooting started, I couldn't bring myself to aim proper. That's probably why I'm the one laying here instead of one of you. Kieran, who had entered in time to hear this exchange, stepped forward. That conscience of yours might be worth listening to, Billy. There's always honest work for a man willing to admit when he's on the wrong path. The implications of the offer hung in the air between them. Billy looked from Kieran to Zara and back again, weighing his options. Prescott would kill me if I turned on him, he said finally. Not if he can't find you, Kieran pointed out. The Johnsons mentioned they're short-handed at their place over by Elk Creek. It's far enough from town that you wouldn't likely cross paths with your former employers. Hope flickered in Billy's eyes. You'd do that? After what we came here to do? Everyone deserves a second chance, Zara said softly. I suspect Mr. Wade would agree, given his own history of standing up against men like Prescott. The decision to help Billy Tennant start fresh marked a turning point in the conflict. Over the next week, the young man provided valuable information about Prescott's operations and future plans, which Kieran relayed to the territorial marshal when he finally arrived to investigate the shooting. The marshal, a weathered man named Calloway, who had clearly seen his share of range disputes, took statements from everyone involved and examined the evidence with methodical care. You've built quite a case, he told Kieran and Zara as they sat at the kitchen table reviewing the documentation they had gathered. Witness statements, patterns of intimidation, attempted arson, not to mention the young tenant boy's testimony about direct orders to drive you off the land. Will it be enough? Zara asked. The Western Cattle Company has powerful connections. Marshal Calloway leaned back in his chair. Ordinarily, I'd say it would be a difficult fight, but you've got something they didn't count on. What's that? Kieran inquired. Community support. Calloway gestured toward the window, where several of the neighbors were still keeping watch over the property. The territorial governor is up for re-election next year. He can't afford to be seen favoring big money interests over settled homesteaders, especially when those homesteaders have organized themselves so effectively. His assessment proved accurate. 3 days later, a representative from the territorial governor's office arrived with official papers ordering the Western Cattle Company to cease all actions against Zara Winters and neighboring landowners pending a full investigation into their business practices. Knox Prescott was removed from his position and summoned to Helena to answer questions about his methods. The 2 hired guns who had connections to Howard Hargrove were arrested on outstanding warrants from Wyoming territory. As word spread of these developments, Zara and Kieran found themselves at the center of an impromptu celebration. The neighbors gathered at the homestead, bringing food and drink, music and laughter that filled the once lonely cabin with life. You've changed everything, Daniel Potter told them as fiddle music played and children chased each other around the yard. Not just for yourselves, but for all of us. The cattle companies won't have such an easy time pushing folks around anymore. Zara, watching Kieran demonstrate proper lassoing technique to Timothy and some of the other boys, felt a profound sense of gratitude. We couldn't have done it without all of you, she replied. I've been trying to hold on alone for so long, I'd forgotten what it means to be part of something larger. As the evening progressed, Kieran found his way to Zara's side, his hand finding hers in the gathering darkness. Walk with me? He suggested quietly. They slipped away from the celebration, following the newly completed fence line as it curved around the property. The moon was rising, casting silver light over the landscape and turning the distant mountains into shadows against the star-filled sky. "It's almost time for me to make a decision about that position in the Bitterroot," Kieran said as they walked. "If I'm going to take it, I should leave within the week." Zara's heart constricted at his words, though she had known this moment would come. The immediate danger had passed, and their agreement had been for a month of his help. That time was nearly up. "Of course," she said, striving to keep her voice neutral. "You've more than fulfilled your part of our arrangement." Kieran stopped walking, turning to face her. "Is that what it was? An arrangement?" In the moonlight, his features were cast in contrasts of silver and shadow, but his eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "It started that way," Zara admitted. "But now—" "Now?" he prompted when she didn't continue. Zara took a deep breath. "Now I can't imagine this place without you in it. These past weeks, working beside you, facing danger together, building something that matters, it's shown me that there can be life after loss, a different life than I planned, but perhaps a better one." Kieran reached out, his hand gently cupping her cheek. "I've spent years wandering, Zara, moving from place to place, fighting other people's battles because I couldn't see a way to build something of my own, until I found you." "What are you saying?" Zara whispered, hardly daring to hope. "I'm saying I don't want the job in the Bitterroot. I want to stay here, with you, to continue what we've started, not just the work on the ranch, but what's growing between us." His voice deepened with emotion. "I'm saying I love you, Zara Winters. If you'll have me, I want to build a future here, together." Tears welled in Zara's eyes, but they were tears of joy rather than sorrow. "I love you too," she said, the words coming easily, naturally. "I think I have since you stopped to help me with that fence." Kieran's smile was radiant as he drew her into his arms. Their kiss beneath the vast Montana sky felt like a promise, a beginning rather than an ending. "It keeps the coyotes out," Kieran murmured against her lips, repeating her words from their first meeting. Zara laughed softly. "It does, but it also let one very special wolf in." They returned to the celebration hand in hand, their decision evident in their expressions. The news was met with cheers and congratulations from neighbors who had already begun to consider them a pair. The following spring, with the threat from the cattle company firmly behind them and new legislation in place to protect smaller landholders, Zara and Kieran were married beneath the old oak tree near the stream. The ceremony was attended by all those who had stood with them during their darkest hours, now gathered to celebrate their joy. Daniel Potter served as witness, while Abigail had helped Zara create a wedding dress from fabric ordered specially from Helena. Billy Tennant, now respectably employed by the Johnsons and courting their daughter, played the fiddle as Zara walked to meet her groom. "I never thought I'd find happiness again," Zara confessed as they exchanged vows. "You taught me that the heart can heal, can grow, can love again even deeper than before. And you showed me what it means to have a home, a purpose beyond just surviving," Kieran replied. "Everything I am is yours, Zara. Everything we build from this day forward, we build together." As they sealed their vows with a kiss, cheers erupted from the assembled guests. The celebration that followed lasted well into the night, a fitting beginning to a partnership forged in adversity but built on love, respect, and shared dreams. In the years that followed, the Winters Wade Ranch flourished. The fence that had first brought them together was completed and extended as they acquired neighboring land when old Sam Jeffers decided to retire. The cabin was expanded to accommodate their growing family, first a son named Daniel after their steadfast friend, then twin daughters who inherited their mother's determination and their father's thoughtful nature. The Western Cattle Company eventually sold its holdings in the valley to smaller operators who were willing to work with, rather than against, the established homesteaders. Knox Prescott left Montana Territory in disgrace, his methods exposed and his reputation in tatters. On the 10th anniversary of their first meeting, Kieran took Zara to the spot where he had found her repairing the fence. A section of the original posts and wire remained, now incorporated into a much larger and more robust boundary. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked as they leaned against the fence, watching their children playing in the distance. "Staying here, fighting for this place when you could have taken the money and started over somewhere easier?" Zara shook her head, her hand finding his as naturally as breathing. "Not for a moment. This land isn't just soil and grass and water rights. It's where I found my strength, where I learned what I'm capable of." She looked up at him, love evident in her eyes. "It's where I found you." Kieran pulled her close, his arms as strong and sure as they had been a decade earlier. "And to think it all started because you were fixing a fence alone." "And you stopped to help," Zara added. "My handsome cowboy, riding to the rescue." "As I recall, you were doing a fine job of rescuing yourself." Kieran chuckled. "I just provided an extra pair of hands. And a heart to match my own," Zara said softly. "That made all the difference." As the sun began to set over the Montana landscape they both loved, casting long shadows across the land they had defended together, they stood in comfortable silence, watching their legacy take shape before them. The fence that had once been a solitary woman's defense against the world had become the boundary of a thriving family's domain, a symbol of perseverance, courage, and the unexpected ways that love can find us when we least expect it, but most need it. And in the distance, as if to remind them of where their journey began, a coyote howled not a threat, but a part of the wild harmony that made this rugged, beautiful land home.